A very good morning, children. Children, today we shall be starting with Unit 4. Okay? And if you look into your textbook, please sit with your textbooks, children, because we're going to talk a lot relating to the textbook. So please look into the index. If you see Unit 4, you have 4.1. It's a poem. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Okay, so that poem is not there for your board exam. It's cancelled. And you have the last 4.6. Okay, that's a lesson. The gift of Magi. That's also cancelled. That's not there for your board exam. All right. So therefore, we will start with 4.2. The luncheon. This is video 1. And if you look at the picture here, what does it look like? Okay, it's all food over, no? All over food. And the title is, luncheon. The luncheon. Now, when we're talking about lunch, we all know it's food, okay? But why luncheon? Now, luncheon is formal lunch, okay? When you call somebody and you invite somebody, so you call it luncheon. So, the luncheon. So, what is this chapter about? Before we go to the chapter, let's see the author. A little about the author. William Somerset Maugham. He was a distinguished British playwright. He was born in 1874, died in 1965, and he was a novelist and short story writer. He was among the most popular writers of his era and reputedly the highest paid author during the 1930s. His work is characterized by a clear, unadorned style, cosmopolitan settings, and a shrewd understanding of human nature. A most delightfully humorous narrative, The Luncheon is a slice of life story about Morgan's luncheon date proposed to him by a woman who he hopes is a supporter of his art. Well, so he was a distinguished British, playwright, novelist, short story writer. So multi-talented man. And what is very important about him, you see, during his time in 1930s, children, he was the highest paid author. So obviously a very talented man, no? If he is the highest paid author. And this story, The Luncheon, that is written about is actually, talking about a lunch, proposed by a woman to him, she asked for lunch out. And what happens when they go out for lunch? We'll see that in the story, but we'll just do the warming up. Now, if you see, the warming up exercise is on page number 150 in your textbook. You have some questions there. Talk with your partner and discuss the following questions. Now, since here we are not in class, you can just think about, if you have, you can answer this question on your own. Have you ever been invited to lunch at any hotel by your friend? What was the occasion? Did you enjoy the lunch and why? So this you can, just think about it, a past experience. Now, you have another one. People with foibles are often not conscious of them. Do you agree or disagree? Why? Now, what do you mean by people with foibles? Now, foibles is a minor weakness in character or behavior. Okay? What is it? A minor weakness in character or behavior. Now, some people may have, some weakness in them, but they may not be conscious about it, not often conscious of them. Okay, so do you agree or disagree? So that is a personal question. You can just answer that. So let's begin with the chapter, children. I caught sight of her at the play and in answer to a call. I went over during the interval and sat down beside her. It was long since I had last seen her, and if anyone had not mentioned her name, I hardly think I would have recognized her. She addressed me brightly. Well, it's many years since we first met. How time does fly. We are none of us getting any younger. Do you remember the first time I saw you? You asked me to luncheon. Now, here the story is told about the author. He's saying that I caught sight of her. Now, of her is just mentioning a lady, they have gone to see a play, okay? And that lady gives him a call and says, that I know you. So in the interval, what does he do? He goes and he meets her, okay? And does the author remember this lady? No, he doesn't, okay? So he's saying that, I had last seen, I don't even remember that. And if someone had not mentioned her name, I hardly think I would have recognized her, okay? But she seemed to remember him very well. And she addressed me brightly. She remembered. And she's saying, oh, it's many years since we met. And, how the time has flied. So many years have just gone by. We are none of us getting any younger. We're not getting any younger. So they met after many years. Okay, that shows that. And do you remember me? She's saying, the first time I saw you, you asked me to lunch. Now, did I remember? Who's asking this question? The author. He's asking to himself, did I remember? Now he's thinking back. Okay, so now the story is a flashback. So he's talking about some years back. It was 20 years ago and I was living in Paris and I had a tiny apartment and I was earning barely enough money. She had read a book of mine and had written to me about it. I answered, thanking her, and presently I received from her another letter saying she was passing through Paris and would like to have a chat with me. But her time was limited and the only free moment she had was on the following Thursday. And would I give her a little luncheon at Foyet's afterwards. Foyet's is a restaurant and it was so far beyond my means that I had never even thought of going there. I had 80 francs, gold francs, to last me the rest of the month, and a modest luncheon should not cost more than 15. If I cut out coffee for the next 2 weeks, I could manage well enough. Now he recollects 20 years back, okay? He was living in Paris and in a tiny apartment, a small apartment, and he was earning barely, okay? Barely means hardly, much money. And she had read a book of mine. Now, she had read a book of mine means now what was the profession of the author? He was a writer. Okay, so she had read a book and, she had written to him, maybe probably telling him, I like the book, I like what you wrote and all that. And he answered, thanking her and all that. And after that, she had written another letter. Okay, and she said that she would like to meet him. Okay, since she is flying through Paris. Okay, she's passing through Paris and she said, a few moments if we could meet. And she says if we could meet the following Thursday and that also at Foyet. Now, Foyet is a restaurant you're talking about here in Paris and it's a costly restaurant. The phrase there, so far beyond my means it was much more than what, he could spend. It was very costly. So he had around 80 francs. He's thinking about, will he have enough money? So 80 francs was to last him the rest of the month. So he said, even if I take her there and have a modest luncheon means a simple lunch, it will not cost more than 15. So he's planning now what to do in order to save, to see that he will be able to spend that much. You see, he's thinking if I cut out coffee, means if I don't take coffee for the next 2 weeks, he's thinking now he's not going to have coffee because he's taking her for lunch, okay, and he's going to spend there, then he could manage well enough, okay. So let's see what happens. I answered that I would meet my friend at Foyet's on Thursday at 12:30. 12:30 means 12:30, okay. He answered her. She was in appearance imposing rather than attractive, and she gave me the impression of having more teeth, white and large and even, than were necessary for any practical purpose. She was talkative, but since she seemed to want to talk about me, I was prepared to be an attentive listener. Now here, the poet is talking about the woman. She was in appearance imposing. What do you mean by imposing? Imposing means she was very impressive, okay, but she was not attractive. And he was talking about her teeth. You can see here she's smiling more than necessary. She gave me an impression of having more teeth, white and large and even, okay, than were necessary for any practical purpose. And she was talkative, he said. But since she was talking about him, he was a good listener to her. I was startled when the menu was brought, for the prices were a great deal higher than I had thought. But she reassured me. I never eat anything for luncheon, she said. Oh, don't say that, I answered generously. Now, the author has already mentioned he's never gone to this restaurant at Foyt's because it's a very costly one. And he was startled, he was frightened, he was shocked when he saw the menu because the prices were a great deal higher than he thought. But you know what she reassured him? She's saying, don't worry, she's saying, I never eat anything for lunch. So he is very generously telling her, oh, don't say that. I never eat more than one thing. I think people eat far too much nowadays. A little fish, perhaps. I wonder if they have any salmon. Now here she's saying, I don't eat much. And she talks about, she names one of the fish that she wants to eat. And that is salmon. Now salmon is a costly fish. Okay. So let's see what happens. Well, it was early in the year for salmon. And it was not on the menu. But I asked the waiter if there was any. Yes, a beautiful salmon had just come in, and it was the first they had. I ordered it for my guest. The waiter asked her if she would have something while it was being cooked. No, she answered. I never eat more than one thing, unless you had a little caviar. I never mind caviar. Now, we see she is asked for salmon, and the author says, that it was too early in the month, in the year for salmon. Meaning, you don't get the fish every year. There are certain kind of fish you get it only in certain years. So when you don't get it means it's something rare. So something rare is always costly. Okay. So here it's saying that it was early in the year, and fortunately it was, the waiter had it because it was not there in the menu. So when he asked the waiter said, yes, there is. Okay, so fortunately she had. So while it was being cooked, the waiter asked her, do you want anything? So she's saying, I never eat anything, and unless you have a little caviar. Now caviar is what? It is fish eggs. Okay. Now fish eggs are also costly. I knew I could not afford caviar, but I could not very well tell her that. For myself, I chose the cheapest dish on the menu, and that was a mutton chop. I think you're unwise to eat meat, she said. I don't believe in overloading my stomach. Now, the author is thinking a lot here. Okay, you can see he couldn't afford caviar, but he couldn't say no. He couldn't tell her that I can't afford. And he did one thing. He chose the cheapest dish for himself. Now, what did she have to say? She's saying it's very unwise for you to eat meat because that is overloading your stomach. She ate the caviar and she ate the salmon. She talked gaily of art and literature and music. But I wondered what the bill would come to. When my mutton chop arrived, she took me quite seriously to task. Now, you see this lady? She's enjoying her lunch. Okay, she ate the caviar, she ate the salmon, and she's talking gaily, cheerfully. She doesn't have to pay the bill, right? But when the mutton chop came, she even criticized him. Okay, what did she say? I see that you're in the habit of eating a heavy luncheon. I'm sure it's a mistake. Why don't you follow my example and just eat one thing? I couldn't possibly eat anything more unless they had some of those giant asparagus. I should be sorry to leave Paris without having some of them. Okay, so she's talking about him having a heavy lunch, and she says, I would have to have something more. And what was that? Giant asparagus. Now, asparagus is very expensive vegetable. So let's see what happens later. Here are some of the meanings, children. Please go through these meanings. do the assignment given to you, all right, and read the lesson.